Hey, Divine Ones, it's Jerome Braggs, and today we have a very special well-being show. I have with me today a very special guest. When I thought about creating a show where I talked about well-being and what it takes to be well and live well as a soul, having a human experience, and I thought about talking to people that I wanted to talk with who had some type of wisdom or guidance around this, or whose own life journey has been a journey into that. This person was one of the first people that popped up in my mind that I wanted to share some time with and space with and have a conversation with and go deep into that kind of topic. Um, and not only that, but we're also kind of related. We're like play cousins a little bit. So I have been following her on social media. We've had a few conversations, and I just know that what she's going to bring um, is going to be worthwhile. So without further ado, I want to introduce you all to Val Ashford, also known as the AfroBuddha, and her beautiful take on what she likes to call spirituality set free. Welcome,
Yes.
Al.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Again, you're one of my favorite people and one of my favorite people, especially to follow. And I don't know anybody else I want to talk to about well-being more than you. And I
It
know
goes both ways.
Yeah.
It's a mutual love. It goes both ways.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of dive, actually, I want to just dive right in because I know in following you, I've seen you speak of your journey with healing your internal state and how that kind of was the key that unlocked your life.
Yes.
And I know I teach a lot about that, but I want to get your perspective on why that was an important piece for you. Actually, before we even start on why that was an important piece for you, let's start from your journey with that. Like what made you aware that that was the piece that you needed to do?
Man, it wasn't one of those things that you're like automatically aware of it. You know, it's you're aware in retrospection, looking back at it, that was what was going on. But you know, a couple of things with my journey that kind of started the trajectory. I had a lot of really close deaths back to back early in life. From the age of 17, my close brother, who was only a year and a half older than me, was found dead in his sleep at 19 years old. And the trajectory just kind of went from there. When you go through things like that, it changes the entire family and the way that your family is set up. And then, you know, shortly after that, my grandmother, then my mom, then my dad, and it just was like back to back to back deaths for a period of time. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because I think when you deal with death so closely in that way, it causes you to question and think about things that you wouldn't normally think about. I mean, it makes you really look at your own existence. It brings into, you know, it makes it really, really apparent that we are not going to be here forever. Life is short in a lot of ways. And so it makes you want to make whatever adjustments you need to make within your own life to make sure you're getting, you know, living your life to the fullest. So that's been a big part of my experience. Another thing that I share a lot about, just my own internal journey, is dealing with my external. You know, I tell people, I said, I was a fat girl when I was born. I was almost 11 pounds as a baby, and having to kind of come to terms with what that even means, or if it means anything at all, you know. So in the course of the past decade, I've been every size from single digits up until like a size 28. So I've been on all sides of the spectrum. And that in itself has been a big part of my just seeing, you know, the external versus the internal, how people perceive you, how you perceive yourself. So those are the big two things in my life that I feel like have, you know, shifted me onto like a spiritual, I call it spiritual self-mastery, where I want to know everything there is to know about myself, and kind of being in a state of pleasantly unknowing about the universe and God and the energy, you know, the energies we refer to as God. So those two things are the big ones that kind of led me down this path.
So you said something that I want to touch on, because we have similarities in that journey. So I grew up being the thick kid in my peer group, right? So called
Mm-hmm.
chubby, sometimes called
Yeah.
fat, things like that.
Yeah.
And I know for me that dealing with that external narrative becoming my internal narrative is
Yeah. Yeah.
what was a big, I'm going to say, block or hindrance to me experiencing well-being. So it took
Mm-hmm.
me a while to
Yeah.
get that. So I want to know, kind of just diving into that, like, how was
Mm-hmm.
that journey for you? And what did you see? Because you might not have, because mine was kind of dramatic, you know, what it created
Right.
and manifested for me, but it might
Right.
not have been that dramatic for you. But I want to know, like, how did that, growing up as, you know, a person who's not thin,
Right.
what did that do for you? And what did you see that create? How did that affect how you felt about yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. So the weird thing is, you know, I sympathize, and I hear a lot of people have stories about being very, very insecure in young ages. And I think I credit a lot of that to my mom being a plus size woman, and she was a super confident plus size woman, that it really wasn't a thing for me for a really long time. I didn't really like it, you know, a lot of people, you know, talk about like the middle school, the junior high school years being really rough. I didn't really notice it then. And I was a big girl then, but it just, because my mom was, and she was so embracing and accepting of it, you know. And I do remember times where, you know, we would go out to a store and this particular outfit was in style and they didn't have it in my size. And my mom said, we'll go to the fabric store, I'll make it. You know, so she was like very, very supportive of me having positive body images. So it didn't really become a thing until like late in high school, early college years.
Hmm.
So when I left to go to college, shout out NC North Carolina A&T University. When I went to college, that was the first time that it was like, wait a minute, you know, this is a thing. And you know, people start saying things to you. Like, I even had people that I really closely respected, you know, adults that should be older, should be in a mentor place, say, you know, you've always been a chubby kid, but now, you know, you're turning into a woman. You're gonna have to lose the weight if you want to find love. I was told that
Mm.
flat out, that
Mm.
you're not gonna be able to have love from you know, in a romantic sense and be a plus size woman. Those two things don't go together. Or, you know, if you're a plus size woman, then stick to your school and make sure your career is well, because that's going to be what your love is going to be.
Mm.
You don't get to have both. So
Mm.
those ideas really didn't come into my life until 18, 19, 20, after I kind of left the nest, where my mom was kind of, I feel like she kind of protected me from some of that to some degree. So yeah, that was a part of my, when I got to the age where I really wanted to kind of date. I think I'm a late bloomer, you know, so when I didn't start dating and any of that kind of stuff until I was in college. So then it was like, wait a minute, oh, this is an issue. And then
Mm.
it affects you really, really deeply.
Mm. I want to, talking about that, because one thing I see of you, that I've started to do. So again, we kind of have this kind of correlation with that.
Yep.
Is a lot of posting of body positive images,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I know I see with you as well. You know, there's a celebration, and then there's the pushback.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about that pushback,
Yeah.
and being a person that is stepping further into, and again, you know, you didn't have such a dramatic dip down in your
Mm-hmm.
self-worth as far as body image, but being a person that is stepping out further into
Right.
body celebration.
Right.
Can you talk about the benefits of that, and also some of the challenges that come with that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the thing that, what pushes me more and more, and it's like one of those things, the older I get, the more mature I get, the more I don't care about the pushback as much, you know. But when I look at it as this, a lot of people look at you when you're overweight, and I think it goes on both spectrums, probably underweight too, where they look at you and they assume what physical illnesses you're going through. There's an assumption that there's physical illnesses. And so people treat you like someone walking around with a disease on the outside. Mm-hmm. And they say, oh, you should do this. You should try this. People, will flock to you in their attempts to try to offer some level of healing, as if being fat is a wound that you're walking around with. And so that stuff, as much as you try to stay positive, it gets to you, and I experienced a lot of things, especially like in college, and I used to always say, why do the gym rat guys like me? It was always the guys who were like in the gym, working out hardcore. And I'm like, wow, what is this? And it's like they want to take me on as their little project, and she'll be so cute if she loses this weight. So that mindset kind of came on. But I feel like the place that I am now with it is trying to get people to understand that there is no benefit to shaming. No benefit to shaming. And it's so embedded in our culture. Fat phobia is so embedded in our culture that, I have two kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I'm like the nostalgia parent. So I always like make them watch like the old TV shows that I used to love. And what I realize is now as an adult, even like our TV shows were constantly, I try to get them to watch Family Matters, Steve Urkel. My memories of the show was like, oh, it was so good. I used to love watching this with my family. But then I realized that the entire show was based around Steve telling fat jokes about Carl. There was not a single episode that wasn't a thing. And so it's so embedded in our culture that if you're fat, you're unhealthy. And if you're fat, then it's okay for everybody to come up to you and tell you what you need to do. When there's people of normal body sizes walking around with all sorts of illnesses, all sorts of, depression, anxiety, physical illnesses that you can't see, that are just as important or more severe as someone who you feel like you can see what I have going on from the outside. And a big part of that for me was I went through a lot of body images through my marriage. I've been married and divorced, and my ex-husband and I are really good friends, but I went through a lot of image issues while I was married. And so I went to go get the gastric bypass, which everyone said, go get the gastric bypass. That's the thing. And this is not to knock anyone if whatever your choice is, your choice. But in North Carolina, when you go get the gastric bypass, they put you through a year-long process of medical examinations, because basically they want to prove to your insurance company that you are morbidly obese. So for insurance purposes, they have to prove that you're so sick, we're going to go in there and we're going to cut your stomach to this big to force your body to lose the weight. And what happened when I went through this experience, mind you, I'm 4'9", so I'm super, super short. So I'm like 4'9", 280 at the time, right? Which is like, they're looking at their paperwork, and on their paperwork, by their description, I should have diabetes, cholesterol. They gave me a list of the things that they were for certain that I had. But when they started putting me through the examinations, I was a huge headache to them because I didn't have any of the things that I was supposed to have because of my size. And it got to a point where it was a back and forth with me and the doctors, because they said, oh, we're going to send you to a different doctor. They were trying to find doctors who could prove my unhealthiness. Mm-hmm. I had to run on a treadmill and blow a balloon up, just outrageous stuff. And every single test they gave me, I was passing them with flying colors. And so I had one doctor finally say to me, she said, you don't have a weight problem, you have a height problem. It's just, and that was a wide awakening for me, is they couldn't prove my unhealthiness at a size that they considered to be morbidly obese. Hmm. So that kind of, that was a trajectory in itself, where I had to come to a place where I started to accept that I'm actually healthy. So what does this mean? It goes against everything that we've been taught, everything that we've been kind of programmed to believe about about weight. So that's been a big part of it. So, you know, the pushback is dealing with the people who still, you know, really, really believe. And it's not to say a lot of people who are overweight have a lot of health conditions. I understand that too. But I think every health condition is a spiritual condition first. And the weight and the physical body illnesses, all of that is symptomatic of something else going on spiritually.
So diving into that, then, what would you say it was for you? What would the weight be, you know, as because you and I both talked, you just laid it right out, you know, everything
Yeah.
that we experience is some type of reflection of something that's going on internally, both positive and negative.
Yeah.
What would you say the weight was for you? Because I know for me, weight for me was not feeling safe in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what would you say if you could, if you know, and if you don't,
Yeah.
kind of could you tune in and see?
I'm still learning, and I've accepted that I'm still learning, but where I am now in my place of understanding is it is a safety thing. It is wanting to kind of feel protected. And even though my mom kind of wanted me to feel protected, I kind of adopted unknowingly some of her ideas and concepts about, you know, being a plus size woman. And also dealing with, you know, death and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. I feel like I kind of hold that stuff in emotionally. And that is, to me, is where the weight part comes in. You have to realize that when the body gains weight, it's out of love. Mm-hmm. Your body loves you. That's why it's gaining the weight. It's trying to protect you. Your body's saying, oh no, in case something happens, let's strap this emergency fat on because she may need it one day for something. So it really is connected to like the root chakra and survival and all those kind of things. And what I'm noticing, I'm kind of like in the middle of like a self-experiment where just speaking to my body, speaking to myself, speaking love into myself. And what I've noticed is that my body will start to naturally shed weight without making any other changes, simply from the way that I speak to and of myself. So, you know, we'll come back in a couple of years and look and see what's happened. Yeah.
I think you said something, you know, this really, I just want to dive into, I mean, I just want to hold space for that, what you said, which is, because I know from in my own journey, that was such a tremendous turning point that shifted my whole being when I understood that my body is not attacking. Anything my body does is not out of attack. It's actually done out of love.
Yeah.
And I think for those watching and listening that may be experiencing anything, where they're experiencing, you know, they're not a weight that they want to be, because I think that's what you talked about is so beautiful, that it's not any weight that you are is fine and doesn't mean that you're healthy. Is it the weight that you want is the only question. Yeah. And so if they're not in the way that they want or whatever, it's not that the body is attacking us, it's loving us. Yeah. And I want you to speak a little bit more to that, not just about the body, but understanding, because I know you speak about spirituality set free, which I want to ask you a question about here in just a second. But that whole viewpoint of, you know, the shift that things are being done out of love and not attack.
Yeah. So it's, I made a statement recently about, you know, fat phobia, and asking people who consider themselves fat if they have fat phobia, if they have adopted this idea that my body hates me or my body is turning against me, and why, you know, if I pass by, and I used to say stuff like that, I pass by a bakery and gain 5 pounds, like my body hates me, you know what I mean? And so you have to ask yourself, can you accept that your body actually loves you? Can you accept that the weight that you are is perfect? If for some reason something changed with the way the universe works, and all of a sudden gaining weight or losing weight was no longer a thing, it wasn't even possible, it was taken off the table completely, would you walk around for the rest of your days hating your body, or would you figure out how to love yourself as is? That's the big question for me. And it is outside of just weight. It's about everything that's happening in your world, in your existence. If you can look at it from the angle of these things are all happening for me instead of these things all happening to me, you know, it breaks you apart from that victim mentality. We're not victims, you know, we're active participants in, you know, in life. And so whatever our circumstances are, whether it's weight, money, love, anything, what am I supposed to be learning from this? What am I supposed to be getting? What messages can I receive from this experience? Oh, did I lose you?
You're back.
There, it is. Okay.
Yeah, I think
Did it blink out for a second?
No, I think I still heard you, but the video
Okay.
bleeped out for a second. But just a second.
Yeah, the video blinked out.
I really want to honor that, because it's in the journey within well-being, learning how what it was for me. And I want to ask you some questions again about you, but what it was for me was learning to understand that every part of my being loves me, and it's just waiting on me to return the favor.
Yeah.
And that was kind of yeah, that was the thing. And I see you speaking so much about that, especially in your, which I just love, which is, you know, spirituality set free. When I was looking at your combination of Afro and Buddha, so I want you to kind of explain that, because I don't want to give that away. But you know why you said Afro and Buddha, and why you got to spirituality set free.
It's so, you know, I'm going to say weird, but I'm going to replace it with divine, because it wasn't really, it didn't feel like a name that I created. It came to me in deep meditation. It was right after my father had passed away, and I took a week off from counseling and doing sessions and things to just kind of honor myself and connect to my father's energy. And, you know, I was basically just sleeping and meditating for a week. That's, you know, I gave myself space to do that. And in that time, that's when the AfroBuddha came across to me. And the way that it was described to me in kind of like this dream meditation state is, you know, the Afro is what happens to our hair if we don't do anything to it. If we just let it be and grow the way that it wants to grow, don't try to shape it, don't try to braid it, don't try to flat iron it, just let it go. It naturally forms what we consider to be an Afro. And then Buddha is just an embodiment of love, you know, of love and understanding and peace, you know, similar to, you know, I look at, you know, Buddha and Jesus as being the same type of energy in terms of it's just an embodiment of love. Mm-hmm. So putting those two things together and saying, you know, we don't have to try to force ourselves into anybody's spiritual boxes. You can just let your spirituality just grow out in a big Afro. Just let it do its thing. Just leave it alone and see where it naturally goes. So that's kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah, I love that, because I think one of the keys for truly living well, and I won't even say it's the key, it's more of a necessity, because it's not even like something that you need to go find to unlock. It's just, if you don't have it, it's just not going to open. Right. Is being our true selves.
Yeah.
You know, being that, and I love, for people of a color, particularly Black Americans, yes, the idea of being ourselves, and that's all we have to be to experience wellness and well-being in our lives, is still a foreign concept.
It is very foreign concept. We're still dealing with, you know, waiting for states to pass a law so we can wear our hair like we want to work, which seems ridiculous in 2019. That, you know, what we're talking about is deep-seated levels of prejudice, where you have all of these assumptions about someone based off of the way that they style their hair, which is, it feels like it should be common sense that you can't dictate how well a person can perform in a work setting by the style of their hair, but we're still dealing with that, you know? I think safety and acceptance, specifically in the Black culture, is still a really big a real big open wound, you know?
Mhm.
And I think about those two things is we're not being provided, or we haven't opened up and allowed ourselves to be really accepting of safety. When I look at all of the things going on in terms of, the stuff with the police and still dealing with Black people getting killed over, ridiculous things. I just, how can we feel safe here?
Mhm.
And acceptance and safety go hand in hand.
Yeah, so you just opened up, and I know we could talk about that forever. And I want to dive for maybe 2 minutes into this, because
Okay.
this is really important that you're sharing, because safety and acceptance are part of our natural frequency. They're
Right.
part of they're aspects of the frequency of love, is which we're actually made of. And
Right.
so if we don't have an embodiment of those, we are actually going to be disconnected from the frequency of ourselves, and
Right.
we can't manifest good stuff out of that. But I want to, you talk so much about changing the narratives, the inner narratives that we have. So
Right.
as just touching really quickly, because as Black peoples especially, but any peoples, but especially Black peoples, when you
Okay.
live in an environment that the consistent narrative is you are not safe,
Yeah.
and there is something not enough about you, something
Yeah.
wrong or not enough or not,
Yeah.
that does not belong. So these are the
Yeah.
two dominant narratives that you get about your being.
Absolutely.
What would you, to those listening, again, especially for those who are Black,
Yeah.
how do you switch that because that narrative becomes our inner narrative. There's no way that it can't when you're growing
Yeah.
up. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So how do you begin to switch that narrative off and switch on the experience and the narrative of acceptance and safety?
Yeah. So the first step to all of that is self-awareness, because I think that that's the most common barrier to it, is not being self-aware enough to understand what narratives that we've adopted. That's the big part, is a lot of us are walking around in anger and frustration, rightfully so, but getting out of this place where it's looking for people to blame and asking ourselves, have I really dissected my own understanding of these things in a way? And once you understand it for yourself, then it can put you on a trajectory or path to try to make whatever changes need to be made. And it's understanding that whatever changes you see need to be made in the world, you have to start within yourself making those changes. Because I think there's a lot of us who want to change the world, but we haven't addressed where we're being affected. If you can't identify the wound, then how can you heal from it? So that's the big thing, is I think of us standing in a place where we accept ourselves, where we create safe spaces for ourselves in our own environments, where we can feel accepted and where we can feel like we are enough. Because I think that that's at the core of it, is we don't feel like we're enough. We still, to a certain degree, feel this feeling of having to change ourselves in some way to be accepted. And that's not fair. That's not fair to the wholeness of who we are, because what you're really, it's kind of a slap in the face to the God within you, to say you need to change this in order to be here on this planet that is home to all of us.
Mm.
So that's a big part of it. Self-awareness, finding the self-awareness first.
Yeah. So one more question before I go into these. I have some rapid questions for you before we close our interview.
Okay.
But I wanted to, the spirituality set free, because every time I think about that, I have so many ideas about it. I love it.
Yes.
I want to get your perspective on what that means for you and why that's necessary for us in this time, to experience well-being.
Right. So spirituality for me, a Black girl from the South, right? I'm right here in Eastern North Carolina, in the middle of the Bible Belt. And for those of you who are not from the South, we call it the Bible Belt because there's literally churches everywhere. Every block there's a church. And being raised in an environment where everyone is Christian. Everyone is Christian. It's rare for you to meet anyone who's not Christian. And having people understand that not labeling yourself as Christian is not the same thing as being the devil, which is kind of what we were led to believe, is that you're one or the other, right? So it's just not me. You're one or the other. Either you are a good Christian or you're the devil, you know? And having more of a broad and worldly perception of, there's like 200 major religions. 200. So when we talk about just one religion, you disconnect yourself from how God is showing up in other places. So, you know, not that you don't have consciousness of Christ and all of those things, but also, what else did God say? You know, who else did God speak to besides the people in the Bible? Were there more people who have been impacted by this energy that we call God? You know, and you'll find that other people are connecting in other ways. Some say their ancestors, some say Allah, some look at Buddha. And really, if you study all the religious texts, it's the same stuff. They're all being translated, that the same message is being sent to everyone, and then they're translating it to the best of their ability. So just because I decide I want to speak a different language than the one that I was brought up around, doesn't mean I won't still speak that language too. You can be fluent in English and get fluency in Spanish and French and whatever other language, and still be fluent in English too. So I look at it as translations of God, rather than, you know, this is good and this is bad. Disconnecting from the whole idea that there's a good and a bad and a right and a wrong in that kind of way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. As somebody who, you know, is in the Bible Belt as well, as a matter of fact, I'm in the buckle of the Bible Belt.
The buckle.
Center of it. You know, it's not only that, but I think, you know, growing up as a Black boy in the South Midwest buckle of the Bible Belt,
right?
One of the things that I think is that since we were talking about Blackness here for a minute,
yeah,
once it's hard for people to think that you can be Black and not, because it's in America, Black and Christianity is one thing.
Right.
So when you kind of are in the space that's in between that somewhere, or you're going out of that, especially in the Bible Belt, it's a hard place to be. It's a challenging road to walk.
It is a challenging road. Yes, absolutely. Right there with you. You know, it's a lot. And really, you're talking about those two things that we know is the inner narrative of our culture, is the safety and the acceptance. I think that's what's specific about the South, is you get both of those really loudly here. Both of those really loudly here, you know? And I think the other side of that is, if we're in a place that's more challenged in this specific area, then there's more opportunity for growth here than there is anywhere else. And looking at it from that perspective, you know, I thought for a long time that I needed to leave from here. I got to get out of North Carolina. That was my mindset for a really long time. You know, I went over to the West Coast. I went to LA. I went to these places, and I saw how it's different in terms of what you're allowed to believe and the experiences you're allowed to have. And I thought that my quest was to get over there where I could be free. And it took a lot for me to get to that place where it's like, no, go back home. Go back home. You know, what help are you doing if you're helping where people don't have, you know, if you're going in a space where everybody is already understanding that, then you're serving no purpose there. Go where they don't get it. Go where they don't have space yet, and do your part in making space in that area.
Yeah. And I want to share this. I want to share something with you that my guide spoke to me, because it's so funny how much I mirror some of your journey, because I had that same conversation. I've been around the world trying to find a place outside of here. And what my guide said to me is, there's some of us that are called to be the embodiment of worthiness.
Right.
in spaces that everything around you says you shouldn't be. And
Mm,
when you become that embodiment of worthiness in that space, your energy, your frequency shifts. It shifts the very place in a very
yeah,
different, in a bigger and different way than if
absolutely.
you were somewhere else. And so
Yeah.
just going right along with what you were saying, sometimes some of us, and you will know, like you could, as you did, if you listen to your inner guidance will say whether or not it's
Yeah.
right to stay. And a
Yeah.
part of that staying is because when you embody your joy and your worthiness in that space, especially in
Right.
spaces where they say you can't find joy here and you can't be worthy here.
Yeah.
When you do it, it evolves the entire space.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like walking around with, with a lantern. You walk around in a lantern in places that there's sunlight. Nobody's, it doesn't really mean anything. But if you walk with a lantern into a room that's dark, then it illuminates everything. It's such an opportunity to illuminate and see things that people couldn't see before. And so, if you, in whatever capacity, feel like you have an illumination, then you
Yeah,
need to go where it's dark.
yeah.
That's your duty. That's your part of your being, is to go where it's dark so that you can shine your light in that area.
Mm. I think that's a great place to wrap up, to bring it to the end.
Okay.
I got some quick questions I want to ask you.
Okay.
I already feel that I want to have you back on because what I originally intended to talk to you about, we just
Okay.
kind of, the flow went somewhere else. So I have a whole nother topic I want to talk with you about. But
Okay.
got some questions I want to ask you. So
Okay.
just quick, first thing that comes off the top of your head,
All right.
what's one activity you can always count on to help you feel well?
Oh, meditation.
Mm,
Meditation.
mm.
You can't avoid it. You can't skip it.
I agree.
Gotta be.
I agree. What advice would your future happier, healthier self give you right now for how to move through your life currently?
Mm, what advice? Keep going. Keep
Mm,
going. Stay the course. Stay the
mm.
course. Yeah.
What's the lesson around well-being it took you the longest to learn?
The lesson around well-being that took me the longest to learn. It probably is the self-acceptance, just full, unapologetic self-acceptance of body, mind, and spirit as one thing, and not
Mm,
compartmentalizing those three things to make them separate. As the separation of those three things is a complete and total illusion. That's the biggest one for me.
mm. All right. So what's well-being mean to you?
Well-being. It is well in my being, peace in my existence, peace in my environment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Having peace by any means necessary, whether that means protecting your peace, putting barriers around your peace, making peace and happiness a priority. That's to me what well-being is.
Mm. Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that in the next one. What's one of your guilty pleasures that's totally worth it?
Oh gosh, guilty pleasures. I cuss a lot. I love a good swear. I just feel like you got to drop an F-bomb every now and then. It's like seasoning, like put some salt and pepper on it. You got to do
I love that. All right, last one. What's one thing
it.
you
Okay.
wish more people would talk about in the open?
One thing I wish more people would talk about is insecurities.
Mm,
Insecurities. I think we have a lot of people, we're trying to cover up what we're insecure about. And I think that if we talked about it, we would see we all kind of share the same ones.
mm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. This has been a deep honor and a pleasure. I think some great stuff came out of here. Well, I know some great things came out of here. Thank you for sharing your time with me on the Wellbeing Show. And for all that are watching and listening, go check out her work. Go listen to her words. I promise you that you will be well nourished, well fed, and well being.
Yes.
You will get what you need for your well being.
Yes.
Thank you, Val, for being here. Until
Thank
next
you
time.
for having me.
I love you. Go love yourself.